Welcome back. We are in Kigali, Rwanda for this installment of the CNBC Africa Rwanda Focus debate. It is the Kwibuka period, 22 years on, and the question we're asking is what way forward for Rwanda as we put a special highlight on the country's economic transformation. On my panel, I'm speaking to Yusuf Murangwa. He's the Director General at the National Institute of Statistics for Rwanda. Also on my panel is Natalie Mpaka. She's the CFO at the Bank of Kigali. Last but not least, Gerard Mukubu, who's the Chief Advocacy Officer at the Private Sector Federation. My name is Boni Tunya. Gentlemen and lady, we focused quite a bit on the SME because we've agreed that the SME space holds the key to the transformation that we're all celebrating and talking about, and we're looking at some of the challenges they are facing. In respect to SMEs, I'd like us to focus on the issue of livelihood creation or employment creation. And once again, Yusuf, as the numbers guy, just paint to us a picture of how the journey has been, where we are now as far as employment creation for the youth of Rwanda, and where you see it, what are the low-hanging fruits that we could go after in terms of ensuring that Rwanda's young people have access to decent livelihood?
Thank you very much. As I said earlier, the journey has been long. When you see from more than 90% of the population in agriculture to 70% now, that's about 20% of those working moving out of agriculture and mainly to SMEs. Now, SMEs an easier route out of agriculture and especially to employment, and it has happened. And we think the opportunities going forward are a lot in twofolds. Opportunities going forward are a lot in twofolds. First of all, those that already exist and those that come in the same line of business, as we mentioned before, we need to see more of refinement of how they do their business, the craftsmanship, especially as we link up with the Made in Rwanda. Right. You want it to come to a point where things that have been produced in Rwanda, at least in terms of satisfaction and quality, match those that we import from outside.
Right. So there's obviously a very strong case for manufacturing in Rwanda.
Yes. Right. And it's possible because from what we've seen, from the discussions that are taking place, it just needs a little bit of refinement, especially in technical and vocational education, and that will happen. Right. And that will happen. And the mindset is already changing. Right. So that should happen.
Natalie, obviously you're excited at the thought of more people having jobs or more people being employed because these people open accounts with you. But also paint to us a picture of that journey and where we are, because a lot of our country is always judged by its young people. And the question has always been, are the young people of this country engaged? Do they have opportunities where they can earn something? So from a private sector's point of view, how have things been and how could we make this better?
Thanks, Bonnie. Where we are coming from is actually an amazing journey, because you look at education being, first of all, the base, the foundation here, because we have seen lots of owner-managed SMEs now opening, let's say, business account, right, which traditionally was not the case because they were managing it under their own account and just making payment and, you know, keeping or retaining whatever is left. Right. Now you're seeing them opening business account, and also with the youngsters coming out from universities and so on, you're seeing the youngsters now opening also account. And maintaining this account even after university graduation means they've got employment. It means also, you see, money is flowing. So although it is still at kind of small capacity, I would say, the SME employing youngsters, but we are saying there's lots of improvement, and also we are supporting them in terms of doing, let's say, helping them with the financial knowledge that they need to manage their businesses.
Right.
The reforms in terms of, let's say, the RRA, having the machine now tracking the payment, is also helping. Everything is kind of falling into place.
Right. Gerard, Yusuf pointed out to an issue about the manufacturing industry and the opportunities thereof as far as first employment creation and also just pushing the Rwandan brand. You obviously have quite a chunk of your membership that are in the manufacturing space. How would you assess the manufacturing space and growth of it for the Rwandan economy 22 years on?
Thank you, Tanya, for the question. You know, we come from far. You know, before genocide, before 1994, I think we had not more than 20 manufacturers countrywide.
So these are local or foreigners?
Some was multinationals, like Brarirwa,
yes.
and I think, okay, I think telecoms. I don't know if you had no telecoms, but now in manufacturing sector, we're counting above 80 companies.
Right.
Of course, local and including some multinationals. And you can understand yourself that in terms of production, the production has increased. In terms of job creations, jobs has been created with a very big number. And now we are still, as an umbrella organization, we are still supporting them to increase the production, But we know that there are some challenges.
Right. When you say you're supporting them, what sort of support is this? Because it will be very interesting and also a learning point for a lot of other African nations to learn how do we design incentives for local manufacturers? Because you're saying, hey, they can do all these things, they can employ our young people, but a lot of local manufacturers will say our stuff is expensive because the business environment is really tough for us. What are the incentives, for example, that Rwanda has put in place, and anyone can take this question, to promote local manufacturers, even as we began at the Made in Rwanda campaign?
Yeah, through the investment code championed by RDB, Rwanda Development Board, there are a lot of incentives, such, for example, exemptions on customs duties when, you, for example, a local manufacturing company imports equipment to be used in the company. So they are exempted from the customs duties to be paid, and it's around 25% of 25% of the value of an equipment.
That's quite
is
substantial.
not, And when you get certificate from RDB, Rwanda Development Board, certificate of investment, there is a package of incentives, including even a tax holiday in terms of the profit tax holiday during 3 to 5 years.
Right.
So there is a couple of incentives given by the government institutions, but also if you export, for example, like you talked about the tea companies and coffee companies. If you export at a certain amount, then I don't remember the amount, but you are also exempted to not pay a profit tax of 3 to 7%.
Right.
Even if you employ again above 100 employees,
Right.
to above 1,000, as the number is increasing, then you are exempted to pay some percentage in terms of profit tax. Normally, the corporate company pay 30% of the profit tax,
Right.
but you can get an incentive to 70%. Then instead of paying 30%, you can pay 23% of the profit tax, and this helps.
Interesting. Yes.
Sorry, just to add into what Gerard has just mentioned, there's also funding. For example, you've heard recently of the lower lending rate for export companies. So on top of tax discount, you have things like you can now borrow at a subsidized cost if you wanted to manufacture and export your goods. So
are these investors taking advantage of some of this?
That's not mostly with let's say Bank of Kigali, but I expect it's BRD and the development banks are seeing a growth, because if you can export and it's cheaper to raise a fund, why not? And on top of that, the more people you employ, the less tax you pay, and so on. There are a lot of incentives to stimulate the SME market.
Right. Is going to make a case for the manufacturing space?
I think it's been mentioned before, but I think the most important incentive is the business environment. We've seen the progress that Rwanda has made in terms of business environment. And I don't think it should be taken lightly, because businesses want to operate in a transparent environment. They want an environment that is predictable, that is safe. In Rwanda, you operate your businesses, you're not afraid of any security risks. You want to survive. You want to survive for the next 10, 50, 100 years. So this environment is very conducive for business.
Right. I'd like us to shift gears a little bit and look at the macroeconomic space and some of the policies that have been put in place for Rwanda. And a lot of the decisions in this have been based on different platforms, different policies, and one of the key strategies has obviously been part of the Vision 2020 will be the EDPRS2. And everyone likes to quote that, but we like to learn from a best practice point of view, how can African economies put policies in place and stick to them? Because that is a big challenge. We talk about a lot of policies that have been put in place, and do we have the capacity to stick to them so that we can say in 10, 5, 15 years that we actually planned this and it has turned out? Yusuf, again, because this, when we're reporting the success of some of these policies, it always comes back to you. Just paint to us a picture of that process of setting up such policies and the implementation journey.
I think there's always a misconception, and people skip so quickly to implementation or failure to implement. From what we see, in fact, things have to start earlier than that. When you look at the whole visioning process of Rwanda, which comes down to leadership, even from Vision 2020, thinking big, looking far, just like the quote from His Excellency, and you have to think it through very well. You have to have the ability to think it through very well, to engage all stakeholders that are concerned, so that you have a good assessment of where you're starting from, and you make commitments that you understand and you're ready to take on, and then you phase them, like we phased PRS-P, EDPRS-1 and EDPRS-2, and then the whole governance and accountability framework and everything, and it will work.
Right.
So in fact, that's what has happened in Rwanda.
Right. What has been the success, and this is another question outside looking in, of how has the government managed to translate this? Because the policy is out there, but there are different implementers. What is the chain that allows for the implementers to actually carry this vision and transfer it to the next set of implementers? Because we have a lot of good policies across the African continent, but the implementers at times just don't get it?
I think it's the trust. It's this trust. You know, the hierarchy is long, from the highest authority, His Excellency, to the lowest implementer. But people along the whole hierarchy, they've committed and they've trusted the vision. They've committed, they've trusted the vision. They've made it theirs. They've made it theirs. So it's a lot in terms of communication. And it has to be the right vision. Right. That shows that the vision is right in the first place. Because if it's not right, they'll not agree with it.
Right.
So it's a right vision. It's been communicated well. People have trusted it. People have committed to it.
Right. Let's still in line with that.
So
Yes,
just
go. Sure, go ahead.
and because I like the vision part. I think the right vision here, if we can elaborate it further, it is more in terms of who are the beneficiaries. So we actually had the vision that we are working on here. It is more of what works for Rwandans, as opposed when you look around in the continent or elsewhere, it is more the vision of someone else brings in the vision and brings in maybe the funding, and it may not work locally. Because it is not the right vision. So here we are talking who are the interested parties. It's first of all the Rwandans being united. Right. Yes, they don't have much in terms of resources, in terms of the country is small compared to XYZ other sizes, but their unity in terms of making their worth from themselves, the accountability part of it, and they're just working together. It's not about the division and the money that is coming from out. It's more how it's being managed. Is it for our benefit or not? So I think that's what has made it, everybody works together. So yes, the vision is there, but because it is all shared and the benefit is spread across, it can only work. Right. It just needs timing in terms of...
Right. Let's talk about how to finance this vision, because that's the other critical point. While we put out the vision, how do we finance it? And there's a lot of concern about how we budget. Currently, Rwanda is funding 66% of its budget, which is a very good thing compared to standards across the African continent. But still, you'd get a feeling that there's a lot of reliance on aid. But I'm also particular about the cost of running governments, and that has, in many areas, derailed the process of implementing such visions for the different countries. Let's start with that funding process and the relationship with development partners. And how can we grow this to ensure that the growth that we so desire keeps coming? Let's start with Gerard, but anyone can take that question.
The funding aspect, of course, it's a very difficult one. It's a very difficult one. But as I told you, with the national budget framework, it's very interesting that the private sector is involved, starting from the planning process until the end. What it means that as private sector operators, we know that there is a money there in this sector, and then we take the opportunity. Take opportunity to use this money, the expenses from the government, and we take the opportunity, and then after, our money, our revenues come.
Right. Incidentally, what has been the relationship between the private sector, PSF, and the Rwandan government, before we get back to the whole funding story?
In fact, historically, before the private sector, before 1994, if we talk about it was a department. Private Sector Federation was a department in the Ministry of Trade and Industry. But since 1999, private sector became independent, autonomous, operating on contribution of members, membership-based organization. So we didn't have any money from the government. Before, we used to use the money from the government money. But since 1999, we use our own.
So obviously right now it's
That's
easier to track the growth,
yes,
the growth aspect.
Yeah.
Let's get back to that conversation of the funding and access. I'd like Natalie's comment on then what is the relationship going forward, because funding is never enough. Everyone says it's not enough. How would you, as we imagine the future, what are the opportunities for Rwanda as far as financing some of these projects is concerned? What are the alternative thoughts that we could put in place to ensure that there may not be traditional ways of how Rwanda has funded its economic and development agenda, but there are opportunities that we currently face?
We are looking at the aid now kind of switching from the aid, the budget being financed from aid into the stimulating FDIs, foreign direct investment. So we are saying, you've seen the shift, the government going from like selling its shares in many organizations. So promoting the use of the capital market. So even in the SMEs or in the medium-sized businesses where government has shares, by it selling its shares or a portion of it to foreign investment, it will mean we get the access to funding, we'll get the growth expected, because the fact that they've brought in money, they'll bring in the expertise and the resources required to get the return they're expecting. So that will see us depending less and less from aid, and also growing and increasing our own revenues. So we need to stimulate FDIs, because we now have the reforms in terms of environment. We're now saying RDB has done enough in terms of making it easy to set up investment. Now it is more just us internally.
RDB is a super ministry in Rwanda.
Yeah. So it's more now internally just getting now businesses out in the market and delivering. If I can deliver the return, the foreign to attract the foreign investment, then I'll go with.
Interesting.
With my
Yusuf, what is this changing face of funding development in Rwanda, and is it unique to Rwanda, or have we also seen it in other parts of the continent?
It is not unique.
Right.
It is not unique. First of all, to start with, after the genocide against the Tutsis, it was expected. It was expected the government, the country had to rely on a lot of donations, because the infrastructure to raise resources locally was not there. But again, we've seen, as expected, with the good performance of the government and the economy, that share reducing to about maybe 30% now. In fact, it's around 20%.
Right.
Because 20% is actually donations, aid, and the 10%, 15% is actually loans. It's not handouts.
Right.
So and going forward, it should be a mix, and it will happen from what we see. If everything goes as it's going, it will be a mix of Rwandans saving money for investment. As people's wealth increase, they fix the basics. They are going to school, health, they are eating. The next thing should be saving. Should be saving to invest as individuals, but also as a country.
Right.
And the second part of it will be people bringing in money from outside, either through foreign direct investment or any other persons. And it will be like they're helping Rwanda, but to help themselves, because they'll also be gaining.
Right.
So they'll be helping Rwanda to get the capital to invest and develop and grow, but in it they'll be having profits as well.
Right.
So it will be a win-win. It will not be a beggar supporter relationship. It will be a business.
It will be level playing field. Gentlemen and lady, we need to bring this to a landing, and obviously the whole conversation of this journey is a remarkable one, and it's envied by a lot of African economies. As your closing comments, I would like us each one to give each one of us about 30 seconds to just what next? Where do we go from here? Let's start with Gerard, and we'll end at Yusuf.
Thank you, Tanya. Transformation is a process. We as private sector operators, we are major players. specifically in economic transformation. We have a lot of support from the government, and we are ready to work hand in hand with the government to achieve our vision 2020 with all targets.
Right. All right, Anthony.
Thank you. The next level for the financial services and financial sector is still of now sustainability. So we now have the reforms that have set the platforms. We have the environment that's very good in terms of generating return to all stakeholders. So we now have the opportunity just to go educate the market, get everybody into the savings culture, get the appropriate investment interest from foreign and so on, and utilize the resources we have in the country, which is in terms of improving the services that we are offering and growing the skills.
Right. Finally, so
I think the next level should be achieving what we've achieved in the past, but a little bit quicker, like doubling the speed, and the ingredients are in place, and the prerequisites are in place, leadership, governance. The initial bottlenecks have been fixed, and they are being fixed every other day. So we can only see more development, I think, if everything remains as it is.
Right. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you very much.
And thank you, CNBC Africa.
Thank you.
Africa for this conversation.
Always a pleasure. It is a pleasure to bring this conversation and to drive the whole story of the transformation of Africa as a whole. Ladies and gentlemen and viewers, thank you once again for joining us in the CNBC Africa Rwanda-focused panel conversations. We've been looking at 22 years on the economic transformation for Rwanda, and even in this Kwibuka period, which is a time of remembrance where the world joins Rwanda in honoring the memory of the people we lost in the genocide against the Tutsis in 1994, but more importantly, renewing our focus in dreaming bigger and wondering how else could Africa transform going forward. My name is Boni Tunya. Thank you for watching.